Well, I wasn't even backstage. I was sitting in the audience.
You were down in the
I was
audience?
down in the audience. I didn't have to worry because I didn't have a thing to do till the very end of the show, which was to present Best Picture.
Right.
And Howard Koch, who's normally a very cool, collected type person, comes up to me and his hands were going up and down like a Singer sewing machine.
Known for his tough personality, Clint Eastwood was one everyone feared to associate with. Others called him a womanizer who couldn't even remember the women who bore his offspring. But yet, this story is different for Mia, as she witnessed a side of him that made the media question everything we once knew about him. What did Clint do to Mia? And what made her teary after their brief encounter? Join us as we uncover the details surrounding the event, when a black waitress serves Clint Eastwood, saw a note on check, and burst into tears. The black waitress's meeting with Clint Eastwood. When Clint Eastwood sat in her section, Mia had no clue her world was about to flip upside down. She adjusted her apron and glanced at the clock hanging above the diner's counter. It was nearing 7 p.m., the time when the dinner rush usually began to fade, leaving the pace slower as her shift neared its end. For most people, the little diner off the highway was nothing more than a pit stop, a place to grab a bite before continuing their journey. But for Mia, it was her lifeline. At 28, she struggled with long hours here while raising her 6-year-old son, Jordan. Every tip and paycheck went toward keeping their modest apartment and covering Jordan's ever-growing list of school supplies. She moved smoothly from table to table. The regulars knew bits and pieces of her story. Some would quietly leave an extra $1 or $2 when they could, though Mia never sought anyone's sympathy. The bell above the door jingled, catching Mia's attention. Expecting to see another road-weary traveler, she looked up. But instead, a man entered with a quiet confidence that seemed to make the air in the room grow heavier. He wore a simple button-up shirt and jeans, his weathered face partly obscured by a hat pulled low over his eyes. For a moment, she just stared. But when his eyes met hers, she instantly recognized him. It was Clint Eastwood. Mia's breath caught. Even though she wasn't the type to swoon over celebrities, she didn't have the time or energy for that. But this was different. She was before Clint Eastwood, who was a legend, someone her late father had admired and spoken of often as they watched old westerns together. For a short, brief moment, memories of those times flashed through her mind, but she quickly pushed them aside. Clint settled into a corner booth, and Mia realized it was her turn to serve him. Something about his calm, quiet presence made her pulse quicken. Grabbing her notepad and pen, she took a deep breath and walked over to him. As she got closer, she began noticing the little details, the slightly weathered yet strong hands resting on the table, the piercing eyes under the brim of his hat that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. He looked up just as she reached the booth, with a calm and uncertain expression. After warmly greeting him, she respectfully asked him what she should bring for him. After glancing at the menu briefly before setting it aside, he told her to give him a simple menu, just a coffee and a burger, medium rare, and no onions. Mia jotted it down quickly, but as she turned to leave, she noticed the faint tremor in her hand. Before she could take another step, Clint's voice stopped her. He then asked her casually if she's been having busy nights. But, turning back, she only blinked, surprised. This was something most customers didn't bother with small talk, unless they were regulars. So she wondered how someone as mighty as Clint would be bothered about her. Mia responded that her night was not too bad, but it keeps her on toes to feed. After nodding slightly, the expression softened just a bit as he told her she's got a good pace that is not easy to manage. For a minute, Mia's heart skipped as she turned to look again to see if it was really Clint Eastwood standing before her that was complimenting her. She managed a polite smile, unsure of what to say. This was Clint Eastwood, a man she'd only ever seen on screen acknowledging her work. She excused herself politely and retreated to the counter to put in his order, her thoughts racing. According to her, he could dine in the finest restaurants in California. Yet here he was, sipping water from a chipped glass and waiting for a burger like any other traveler. But then, why was he here in this tiny diner off the highway? And what did he notice in Mia? Clint Eastwood came for Mia. When the order was ready, Mia carefully carried the plate and coffee to his table, setting them down with carefulness. She caught a brief appreciative glance from him. And then, she simply said, "Thank you." Clint Eastwood sounded casual again by telling her she's welcome, though something about the moment felt anything but ordinary. As Mia returned to serve other tables, she couldn't help but notice he wasn't in any hurry. He ate slowly, almost as if lost in thought, occasionally sipping his coffee. There was a contemplative air about him that seemed to linger, making the entire room feel quieter, heavier, as if something significant was happening just beneath the surface. But why did it feel like he wasn't just here for a meal? Something about his presence stayed in the back of her mind, a sure feeling she couldn't shake. Mia kept busy refilling coffee cups, clearing tables, and taking new orders, but her eyes kept drifting back to Clint's booth. He ate slowly, almost deliberately, as though he had all the time in the world. Occasionally, their eyes would meet, and he'd offer her a polite nod, a silent acknowledgement that sent a flutter through her stomach. When he finished his meal, Clint raised his hand slightly to get her attention. Mia wiped her hands on her apron, composing herself before walking over to ask him if everything is all right. But then, with his usual warm smile, he responded that everything is perfect, before commenting to her again that he just ate one of the best burgers he's ever had in a long time. The unexpected compliment made her chuckle lightly, but then she said she'd be sure to let the cook know because he'd be very happy to hear that. For a moment, Clint said nothing. He just looked at her, and in that silence, it felt as though he was studying her not in a critical way, but with a kind of curiosity that left her feeling both exposed and strangely seen. After some minutes that felt like forever, Clint boldly told Mia that she's got a good energy about her. Noting that, he told her that she reminded him of someone he knew a long time ago. Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. But then Clint did something that made Mia teary. What did Mia say about it? And why was she happy? Clint made Mia teary. Black Waitress serves Clint Eastwood, saw note on check and burst into tears. After observing the gratitude of his statement, Mia managed to thank Clint Eastwood, before letting him know that just like everyone else, she tries to get through the day. Clint nodded thoughtfully as he told her that just getting through is a trick for survival, which he's proud of. Before she could say anything else, Clint reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, placing them on the table along with a folded piece of paper. Before Mia could understand what Clint just did, he told her to keep the change after sorting her bills, and then he rose up calmly and chipped a note into her hands. Mia's heart pounded as she stared at the note. Mia thanked him softly, though she wasn't sure if he even heard her as he walked toward the door. The bell above it jiggled as he left, and just like that, he was gone. For a few moments, Mia stood frozen by the booth, her eyes fixed on the note as though it might burn her fingers. What could he have written? And why had he been so insistent that she read it? Before Mia opened the note given to her by Clint Eastwood, she had to pause the questions deep within her. That's because there were still tables to serve, and she wasn't one to leave her work unfinished, no matter how much her mind paced with anticipation. By the time she cleared Clint's booth, the diner had quieted down. The last few customers were sipping their coffee or chatting softly while the jukebox hummed faintly in the background. She picked up the folded note with trembling fingers, slipping it into her apron pocket as she finished cleaning the table. wondering why she was anxious when it was just a note Clint gave her. When her shift ended, Mia retreated to the back room to gather her things. Her curiosity finally got the better of her. With a deep breath, she pulled the note from her pocket and carefully unfolded it. Her eyes skimmed the first few lines, and her breath caught. The note read that though he doesn't know much about her, he's seen how she struggles and manages to take care of her restaurant. He then complimented her that he's never seen anyone like her before, and she reminds him of someone special to his heart. Mia's hands trembled as she continued reading the note. Finally, he ended the note with an encouragement to her to find the peace she's always sought for with the little assistance he's rendering to her through the check on the note. After Mia finished crying, she noticed something hidden in the note Clint had given her. How did this note change her life? And what did Mia do about the note? Clint hid a check in the note he had given Mia. Folded inside the note was a check. Mia's breath caught in her chest as her eyes locked on the amount. Clint had pinned to the note a check of $110,000. Mia couldn't contain the joy in her heart as she saw what Clint Eastwood had done. Her knees gave way and she sat down hard on the bench in the back room, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. She wasn't crying because of the large amount of money. Instead, she was crying because she'd been noticed by a star she never expected. As Mia sat there trying to process the complications of emotions within her, one question kept circling her mind. Why her? And more importantly, what would she do with this unexpected blessing? Her thoughts raced to the stack of unpaid bills cluttering her kitchen counter, the worn-out sneakers her son Jordan had been wearing for months, and the leaky faucet in their cramped apartment that she could never afford to fix. This money could solve so many problems. But Clint's words kept echoing in her veins as she remembered his statement that she reminded him of someone very dear to him. Who was that person? And what had made Clint Eastwood, of all people, see something so special in her? Wiping her tears, Mia inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself. She couldn't keep this to herself. She needed to share this moment with someone who had been by her side through thick and thin. Without hesitation, she called her best friend, Tasha. Within minutes, Tasha arrived at the diner, sliding into one of the empty booths across from Mia. Tasha raised up her hands and admonished Mia to wait until she passed her the note. Tasha was shocked that someone with a personality like Clint Eastwood could come to that restaurant and even notice Mia. She couldn't believe her eyes. Mia answered with an audible voice that she knows her life won't remain the same again, but she was still unsure why someone as influential as him would care for someone as low as she is. Tasha reached across the table, taking Mia's hands firmly, and told her that Clint only saw what she's been seeing in her all these years. He saw her hard work and decided to reward it. And he saw her resilience in the face of tough situations in life. Probably, he'd never met someone as confident in her struggle as she is. Mia looked down at the check, and along with the gratitude came doubts like, what if she doesn't deserve this? And what if this was some kind of mistake? But Tasha cheered her up that it wasn't a mistake, and that she really deserves it. That night, long after Jordan had gone to bed, Mia sat at the small kitchen table, the note and check spread out before her. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional creak of old pipes, and the dim light above her flickered faintly. Her thoughts swirled in 1,000 directions. This money could pay off their overdue rent, replace the unreliable car she depended on, and open doors for Jordan opportunities she had only ever dreamed of. But even as she imagined the possibilities, they frightened her. She picked up the note again, reading Clint's words for what felt like the 10th time. She remembered his words that said, "He hopes you get peace." Those words hit deeper than she had expected. How many years had she spent just trying to keep her head above water? She'd worked double shifts, skipped meals so Jordan wouldn't have to, and pushed herself to exhaustion more times than she could count. Through it all, she'd felt invisible, like the world didn't care whether she made it or not. But Clint Eastwood had seen her. Mia then thought of her father, her greatest supporter before he passed. He used to tell her to not let the world wear her down because she's got the fire in her. For the first time in years, she felt that energy in her again. She pulled out a notepad and began jotting possibilities and ideas. But one idea kept coming back, louder than the rest. What was the idea? And how did Mia execute it? Mia decided to execute her plans. The next morning, Mia sipped her coffee, watching Jordan play with his action figures on the worn carpet. After a sleepless night of reflection, she had made her decision. The first person she called was Tasha. She told her her plans to go to the bank, and from there, head to the college to see if she can do some documentation for her studies. Tasha didn't hesitate when she told her she needed her to watch her son while she went to the bank. She encouraged her and gave her all the support she needed. With Jordan happily settled at Tasha's house, Mia drove to the bank. At the bank, the teller, a young woman with a cheerful smile, raised her eyebrows slightly when she saw the amount and asked her how she'd gotten such a large amount. But Mia only smiled. So, the teller didn't push further. After leaving the bank, she found herself driving to the local community college. For years, she'd walked by its campus, always wondering what it might feel like to sit in a classroom again, to learn and grow. With trembling hands, she stepped inside and approached the admissions desk to proceed with the paperwork to sign her into college. As Mia filled out the paperwork, her anxiety got replaced by the happiness within her. She thought about how to make her son proud by continuing her school. Weeks turned into months, and Mia's life began to transform in ways she hadn't thought possible. She jiggled her shifts at the diner with evening classes at the community college. The balance wasn't easy, but she had to keep pushing. Even Jordan noticed the change. He'd proudly tell his friends that his mom was going to college. Every time she heard it, she couldn't help but smile. Inspired by Clint's gesture, Mia began setting aside a portion of the money to quietly help others in her community. Whether it was groceries for a struggling single parent or textbooks for a student in need, she found ways to give back to the community. One evening, as she pored over her accounting textbook at the kitchen table, Jordan tugged at her sleeve as he asked her if Clint would ever come back to the dinner again. Mia paused, caught off guard by the question. Would Clint Eastwood ever return? She didn't know, but one thing was certain. His impact on her life was permanent. That night, as Mia closed her textbook and prepared for bed, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. From that day forward, every time a stranger entered her section at the diner, Mia greeted them with the same warmth and grace she always had. But then, who is Clint Eastwood? And has he always had this kind gesture? Let's find out. The true nature of Clint Eastwood. Born on the 31st May 1930, Eastwood came into life at St. Francis Memorial Hospital in San Francisco, to Ruth and Clinton Eastwood. During her son's fame, his mother, Ruth, was known by the surname of her second husband, John Belden Wood, whom she married after the death of Clinton Sr. Clint Eastwood was nicknamed Samson by hospital nurses because he weighed 11 pounds 6 ounces at birth. He has a younger sister, Jean Bernhardt, and is of English, Irish, Scottish, and Dutch ancestry. Clint Eastwood is descended from Mayflower passenger William Bradford, and through this line is the 12th generation born in North America. His family relocated 3 times during the 1930s, as his father changed occupations. Contrary to what Clint Eastwood has indicated in media interviews, they did not move between 1940 and 1949. Settling in Piedmont, California, the Eastwoods lived in an affluent area of the town, had a swimming pool, belonged to a country club, and each parent drove their own car. Clint Eastwood's father was a manufacturing executive at Georgia Pacific for most of his working life. As Clint and Jean grew older, Ruth took a clerical job at IBM, pushing the kid Clint to a poor academic performance at school. Clint Eastwood attended Piedmont Middle School, where he was held back due to poor academic scores, and records indicate he also had to attend summer school. From January 1945 until at least January 1946, he attended Piedmont High School, but was asked to leave for writing an obscene suggestion to a school official on the athletic field scoreboard and burning an effigy on the school lawn, on top of other school infractions. He transferred to Oakland Technical High School and graduated on February 2, 1949. Clint Eastwood held a number of odd jobs, including lifeguard, paper carrier, grocery clerk, forest firefighter, and golf caddy. He once said that he tried to enroll at Seattle University in 1951, but instead was drafted into the United States Army during the Korean War. Don Loomis recalled hearing that Clint Eastwood was romancing one of the daughters of a Fort Ord officer, who might have been entreated to watch out for him when names came up for postings. While returning from a prearranged tryst in Seattle, Clint was a passenger on a Douglas AD bomber that ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean near Point Reyes. Using a life raft, he and the pilot swam 2 miles to safety and was discharged in February 1953. In the 1960s, Clint Eastwood was one of the most popular Hollywood stars. He was known for playing tough individualists, like the man with no name in Sergio Leone's Western trilogy. He is also known as a prolific and versatile artist who has worked as an actor, director, and producer. However, Clint Eastwood's personality has been described as both tough and patient, as some say he's worked hard to craft a certain image. He is said to be patient and steadfast, and may prioritize the needs of others over his own. He may also take time to understand a problem before taking action. However, some critics, like McGilligan, claims Clint Eastwood is a cold narcissist, and alleged that he has betrayed friends, colleagues, wives, and lovers. Some have also described him as a cold narcissist and someone with arrested development, making people wonder if everything said about him was truly right after his kind gesture to Mia. What do you think about Clint Eastwood's gesture towards Mia? And what were your key takeaways from their encounter? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.